Chapter 5, Recipe for Betrayal. It began with the salt. That morning, the palace kitchen smelled of rosemary and citrus zest. The usual noise of prep clanged through the corridors, boiling stocks, knives against boards, cooks muttering about sliced fingers and burnt caramel. Elira moved through it all with quiet command. The state dinner would begin in hours. Nobles from the western provinces, foreign envoys from the Elvonian border, an audience with sharp eyes and sharper appetites. It was meant to be a display of power, civility, control. Elira was the only one who knew that beneath the feast's surface, something boiled far hotter. The poisoning attempt 2 nights ago hadn't been random. She still didn't know who had ordered it, but she could feel it now, in her skin, the pressure, the eyes on her back. And when she dipped her spoon into the salted broth, the world tilted, not immediately, not enough to fall, just a lurch, a flicker, a metallic taste where there should have been warmth. She staggered back. Tom caught her elbow. Elira? She blinked, shook her head. I'm fine, just lightheaded. But the dizziness deepened, her breath shortened, the heat of the kitchen began to burn, then black. The pot crashed first, then the body. Panic exploded. Someone screamed. 2 cooks shouted for a healer, then blindness. A copper ladle rolled across the marble like it too had lost its balance. Kael was there within minutes. He shouldn't have been. He was meant to be in council, arguing grain tariffs with Lord Heron. But when he burst through the kitchen doors, coat flung back, sword at his hip, eyes wide and wild, everyone knew. He didn't see a cook collapsed on the floor. He saw his wife. "Get back!" he roared. His voice shattered the room's nerves like glass underfoot. No one moved. He dropped to his knees beside her, lifting her carefully. Her face was damp, skin pale beneath the flush of fever, breath shallow. Her lips moved, but the words didn't make sense. "Elira," he whispered. "Elira, look at me." She didn't. He looked up, eyes burning. "Who touched her plate?" No one spoke. He shouted again. "Ho!" Tom stepped forward. She tasted the broth herself, said it was off, then she collapsed. Kael stood. His fury took shape. "This is twice now," he said, voice low, trembling with rage. "Twice someone has tried to poison her, and you all walk around as if it's normal." "She's just the chef," someone muttered. "No," Kael said. "She's not." He didn't say more. He couldn't, but in that one sentence, everything cracked. Elira drifted in and out of darkness for hours. When the fever broke, it wasn't to pain, but to a quiet hum. Kael was there, at her bedside, hand resting on hers, lips pressed to her knuckles. He looked like ruin. She blinked, voice rasped, "You stayed. I'm not leaving you again." "Poison?" she asked. He nodded. Her eyes closed again. "Salt. Too much of it. Bitter root, maybe, hidden in the finishing spice." He swallowed. "You shouldn't know how to taste poison. You shouldn't be marrying someone who tries to use it." His jaw clenched. "You don't know it was Marcella. No, but someone close to her, someone who wants me gone." Silence stretched between them. Not cold, just heavy. Then, softly, "Kael." He looked at her. "You can't keep pretending this is about politics, not anymore." "I know. You can't have both," his voice cracked. "Elira, you either fight for me or you lose me." It wasn't a threat. It was a truth. Simple. Brutal. Kael stood, pacing the room. "Do you know what happens if I call off the engagement? The council fractures. Half the noble houses revolt. The border collapses. My father will strip my authority. We could lose the throne, the kingdom." "Then why did you marry me?" Her voice was sharp now. Pain didn't stop the bite. "Why swear vows in secret if you were never going to live by them?" "I married you because I loved you more than anything, because I was afraid they'd use you to hurt me. And I was right. They did. But now they're using your silence, your loyalty to a crown I never asked for." His fists clenched. "If I choose you, I lose everything. If you don't, you've already lost me." The quiet that followed was final, not because she meant it to be, but because for the first time, Elira meant every word. And Kael wasn't sure he could fight the world and win, not without breaking it. That night, as Elira slept again, Kael stood in the window. The kingdom shimmered beyond, beautiful and brittle as spun sugar. He had always thought he could protect her by keeping her in the shadows. But now, the shadows were where they hunted her. And if he didn't do something soon, he'd be left holding a kingdom with no one to come home to. Chapter 6, The Prince's Knife. 2 faces, 1 crown, 1 knife. That's what Kael told himself every morning now. He wore one face for the court, smiling through toasts, speaking of alliances and harvest yields, letting his hand linger just long enough on Lady Marcella's arm for whispers to ignite. The other face he wore only behind stone and shadow, in the corners of Elira's bedchamber, in the silence of midnight, where their words ran soft, bitter, desperate. "I hate pretending," Elira whispered once, her head on his chest. "It feels like dying in pieces." He didn't have the heart to tell her that's what royalty was. The game begins. A week had passed since the poisoning. The palace was a garden of venom now, all smiles and honeyed lies. Kael sat at the council table that morning, wearing the cool mask of princely indifference while House de Varine's envoy pushed for additional security during the upcoming Union feast. Everyone knew what it meant, a quiet show of dominance. More guards under Marcella's name. Power shifting from the king's to hers. Kael said nothing. He signed the decree. In the corner of the hall, Elira watched from behind a tray of wine flutes. To them, she was just the kitchen's favorite, the chef who could be trusted with high dining. But beneath the folded napkins, tucked inside each silver glass, was a sliver of parchment. Names, movements, whispers. Elira and Kael were building their map, thread by thread. They needed proof of conspiracy, of attempted murder, of treason. Because if they didn't find it soon, the kingdom would make Kael a husband to a woman who was already sharpening the blade meant for his back. The second attempt. It came quietly this time. A small fire in the wine cellar. A locked door. Smoke. Elira had been checking barrels for an upcoming meal. It should have been routine, but the latch wouldn't open. The smoke thickened. The air thinned. Only luck, and a soot-covered apprentice who panicked and came running, saved her. The lock was broken from the outside. Deliberate. Kael held her after. Arms trembling, rage barely leashed. "She could have died," he snarled at his guard captain. "In my palace. Under my watch." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Even the walls flinched when he was like this, quiet and burning. The king falters. King Aram sat like a shadow in his own throne. His once mighty voice had grown reedy, his mind brittle with paranoia. "She's not your queen," he told Kael one evening, when the prince dared to challenge a decree. "I know," Kael said softly. "I can still replace you," the king warned. "I should have married you off years ago." Kael said nothing, just bowed, but in his silence there was steel. The meeting with Marcella. They met in the winter garden, a place designed for warmth in the cold months, full of glass and sun and artificial blooms. Fitting. Everything about Marcella was carefully cultivated. She wore green silk, her hair curled like something ancient and deadly. "You're late," she said. "I'm engaged," Kael replied. "Timeliness is a casualty." She smiled, not charmed. "You're playing a dangerous game, Your Highness." "I'm royalty, that's all we do." She leaned forward, gaze sharp. "I know about her." Kael didn't blink. "I've known for months," she continued. "Your little ghost in the kitchens, your secret wife." He stilled. "Then why pretend?" "Because I don't want you, Kael. I want what comes with you. The crown, the council, the armies, the leverage." He folded his hands. "Then what are we doing here?" "I'm offering a deal," she said, voice smooth. "We stage a quiet annulment. You marry me. She leaves. Alive if she's lucky." Kael's jaw tensed. "Or," she added with mock sweetness, "you resist, and I bury you both." That night, Kael met Elira in the back hall of the kitchens, where the torches flickered low. He told her everything. The plan, the offer, and the fact that Marcella had one thing they didn't, leverage. She has Rowan. She has the council's ear. "Then we need something bigger," Elira said. "Something that can't be buried or twisted." He touched her face gently. "If we do this, it'll be war." "I was never afraid of fire, Kael." They made the deal the next day. Publicly, Kael agreed to Marcella's proposal. The engagement would move forward. The council would host a final union feast, and with witnesses from all noble houses. Marcella smiled like victory was already hers. But in secret, Kael and Elira moved to expose the rot. What they didn't know, what neither of them saw, was that Marcella had already set her final piece. She wasn't planning a wedding. She was planning a coup. And the union feast would be her knife. Chapter 7, Unmasked. The engagement banquet was a masterpiece of spectacle. Gold linens, white roses dusted in silver, chandeliers lit with glass orbs that shimmered like captive stars. It was the kind of evening designed for memory: music, wine, power thick in the air. Marcella arrived first. She wore a gown the color of blood oranges, cut low at the back, her dark curls gleaming like armor. At her side walked Lord Roan, her father and longtime manipulator of the court's left hand. The nobles bowed low. The air buzzed with victory. The prince would kneel tonight. The throne would be solidified. Elira, if she even dared to exist, would be a ghost, gone without a whimper. But then the music stuttered, the whispers started, the crowd parted, stunned, and Elira walked in. She wore no crown, no noblewoman's silk. She wore the black of the kitchen, modified, elegant, a fitted bodice, sleeves rolled to her forearms, an apron replaced by a sheer sash that shimmered like onyx in torchlight. She did not bow. She did not smile. She walked directly to the raised platform where Kael stood beside Marcella, her gaze locked to his, steady as stone. Marcella went rigid. The king, old, sunken, bitter, nearly rose from his seat. And Kael smiled. Not for the court, for her. Lord Roan, Kael began, his voice smooth. Lady Marcella, before we toast this union, I believe some truths must be laid bare. Murmurs rose. I stand before you not as a prince awaiting a bride, he said, but as a husband. A silence fell so sharp it cut. To the woman you dismissed as a servant, a whisper, a shadow in your house. Kael turned to Elira and offered his hand. She took it, and when she did, when their fingers clasped in front of every noble, every manipulator, every power-hungry viper, the court shattered into chaos. Blasphemy! Someone shouted. A chef! She's nothing! But Kael wasn't done. She is everything, he said. She is my wife, wedded in the Chapel of Thorns over a year ago. Witnessed by the late Bishop Hurrell, sealed in royal ledger under the king's seal, should you wish to verify. A gasp. Even the king went pale. But Marcella didn't flinch. You think that's enough? She said, voice silk-wrapped poison. To parade your secret whore and undo the crown? Kael's eyes went cold. Call her that again. Marcella smiled. She's no queen. No, Elira said, stepping forward. But I'm a better one than you'll ever be. The proof. Elira's closest sous chef entered the hall carrying a heavy crate. He bowed to Kael, then to Elira, then laid the box down. Inside, ledgers. Pages and pages of handwritten records, kitchen supply inventories, cost tracking, coded shipments. I told you, Elira said calmly, that the kitchen sees everything. The court leaned in. We found extra barrels labeled as flour, delivered from Devorain lands. Inside, powdered fire root, blood rose toxin, coin purses meant for bribery, marked in Lord Rowan's cipher. She held up a page. Here, a shipment received the day before the first attempt on my life. The king's face twisted. How dare? Kael cut him off. The kingdom you claim to rule has been bleeding under your nose. The council has been compromised. You let it happen. A nobleman shouted, Those are forged. But Elira stepped forward again. I know what lies look like, she said. I've served liars my whole life, but I also know the truth when I taste it. And this, she held up the ledger, is bitter. Sides are chosen. Marcella moved quickly, too quickly. She reached for the goblet meant for Kael. Her hand flicked. Poison. Kael caught it. He didn't blink as he handed it to his steward. Let them test it. A moment later, the steward paled. Fire root. Enough to kill. The room imploded. Lords began shouting. Some fled. Others accused. Half the court split before the king even raised a hand. Kael turned to Marcella. You could have been anything, he said, but you chose control. I chose survival, she hissed. You were always going to love her more. I did, he said, and now I don't have to hide it. Aftermath. The guards moved in. Rowan was dragged from the room, screaming treason. Marcella stood tall to the end, unbroken even as chains snapped around her wrists. Her smile was pure venom. You think this ends me? I built your court. I know every crack. Then you should have known. Elira said I'd find my way through one. The king tried to stop Kael. One last time. You'll destroy the realm, he rasped. I'd rather rebuild it, Kael replied, than rule one where truth is forbidden. He turned to Elira. In front of this court, I name you my queen. A stunned silence. And then, slowly, applause. Not many, but enough. Enough to say the tide had turned. Chapter 8. Bittersweet. The throne room had never felt so hollow. The tapestries still hung. The golden throne still gleamed beneath the stained glass skylight. But the weight of its power no longer belonged to Kael. The king's voice, though old and brittle, rang with brutal clarity. By royal decree, Kael Rowan is hereby stripped of succession. He will no longer be crown prince of Alarion. Silence followed. The words, heavy as lead, clanged against marble and pride. Kael didn't flinch. He didn't beg, argue, or explain. He simply bowed. And then, beside him, unbowed, unafraid, Elira reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. A murmur rippled through the court, but no one dared speak. Because outside these doors, the tide had already shifted. The people chose their prince. News of the engagement banquet, of the poison, the treason, the proof, had spread like wildfire. Elira's ledgers were posted in town squares. The hidden alliances between House Devorain and corrupt council members were exposed. Kael's removal from the line of succession should have ended him. Instead, it elevated him. Lords from every corner of Alarion came forward, not to restore his claim, but to offer something more dangerous than a crown: trust. They asked him to lead the building of a new council, one where bloodline held less weight than wisdom, where voices outside nobility could be heard, where reform wasn't whispered but written into law. And Kael didn't hesitate. Elira and Kael stayed in the capital, not as monarchs, not as outlaws, but as builders. The palace kitchens became a symbol, oddly enough, a reminder that no part of the kingdom was too small to matter, that the woman once dismissed as a servant had brought down an empire of secrets with nothing but patience, courage, and the truth. Elira never wore a crown. She refused it, but she wore purpose. She sat in meetings, advised on agricultural reforms, and created citywide food distribution plans that reached villages long ignored. She taught apprentices, built a network of kitchen workers across noble houses, eyes and ears that could spot danger far faster than soldiers. She never stopped moving, until tonight. A table for two. The dining room was small, meant for family, not ceremony. The fire crackled low, rain drizzled against the windows. The table was set for two, with no silver goblets, no gold-rimmed plates, just clay dishes, warm bread, and wine. Elira lit a single candle. Kael poured the wine himself. No servants, no guards, no need. She took a sip, rolled it across her tongue, and set the goblet down. "This time," she said, looking at him, "it's not poisoned." He smiled, soft, real, without armor. "Neither is the future." She reached for a slice of bread, tore it in half, and handed him a piece. "You really would have burned the world, wouldn't you?" she said. Kael didn't answer right away. He looked at her, the woman he once married out of necessity and grew to love until it became the truest thing in his life. "I would have," he said, "but I'd rather rebuild it, with you." She nodded, then leaned back and exhaled. A long breath, the kind you only take when the battle is finally over. There would be more challenges, new enemies. Politics never died, it simply changed shape. But tonight they were not prince and secret wife, not symbols of rebellion, not heirs or rulers or threats. Just Kael and Elira, just a man and a woman who'd walked through fire and chosen each other, again and again. And finally, the world wasn't burning. It was healing. Epilogue 1 year later. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden hue across the city of Alarion. The capital had changed, more vibrant now, less shadowed. There were new faces among the nobles. The air smelled of spring blossoms and fresh bread, a reminder of how much had been rebuilt. 1 year had passed since the night Kael's father stripped him of the crown. A year since Elira had stepped into the light, revealing not just her own power, but the cracks in the kingdom's foundation. A year since they had torn down the walls of their past lives to build something new, together. The new council. Kael stood at the head of a long oak table. The newly formed Council of Alarion was a reflection of everything they had worked for, diverse, strong, and determined to change the way the kingdom operated. Lords and ladies from across the land, some noble by birth, others by merit, sat in their places. A few had once been enemies. They were allies. At Kael's side, Elira sat. No longer just the chef of the palace, no longer hidden in the kitchens or dismissed as just a wife. She was now a respected voice in the council, a force of nature in her own right. She was a diplomat, a reformer. Her knowledge of the kingdom's inner workings had made her invaluable. No one could move in the capital without knowing Elira's name. But she was more than that. She'd become Kael's equal. As they reviewed documents, debated new policies, and proposed reforms, there was a quiet understanding between them. Elira's gaze would meet his often, not for advice, but for validation. She didn't need permission anymore. She was here to lead just as much as he was. "Should we propose an increase in trade taxes to fund the new agricultural expansion?" Lord Grevin asked, glancing at Elira. "No," she said, shaking her head. "We've seen what overtaxation has done to the lower districts. Instead, We should incentivize local farmers with subsidies. Trade taxes can stay as they are. Let's focus on improving the infrastructure so we don't see another crop failure this year. The room went quiet for a moment before, one by one, the counselors nodded. Kael caught her eye and smiled, a quiet pride in his gaze. She was no longer a shadow in his world. She was his partner, equal, strong, and indispensable. Trade was up, crops were more abundant than they had been in decades, and the streets no longer echoed with whispers of corruption. The nobles had changed too. Though some still held on to their old ways, many were beginning to see the benefit of true reform. The people were no longer afraid to speak, and their voices were being heard. As Elira and Kael walked through the streets one evening, their hands entwined, the sight of children playing in the streets and merchants calling out their goods brought a quiet joy to their hearts. The city had a pulse now, one that echoed with hope. "I remember when this street was full of whispers," Elira said, her voice low. Kael chuckled. "And now it's full of laughter." They stopped in front of a market stall where a vendor greeted them. Kael glanced at the fruit displayed and picked up a small apple, holding it out to Elira. She smiled and took it, leaning in as if she had some secret to share. "I'm glad we didn't hide anymore," she said. He smiled back. "Me too." A quiet dinner. That night, as they did every year, Kael and Elira had dinner in the small room off the kitchen. No titles, no ceremony, just the two of them. The table was set simply, no gilded plates or ornate goblets, just fresh vegetables, bread, and a roast. The wine was poured in modest crystal glasses, and the soft flicker of candlelight gave the room a quiet warmth. There was no need for anything more. They had everything they wanted. Kael looked across the table at Elira, who was quietly savoring her meal. Her eyes softened with contentment. The same warmth he had felt when they first married, when she was a secret and a promise, still lingered between them. But now it had grown into something deeper, stronger. "Do you remember when we first sat here?" Kael asked, his voice soft. She looked up from her plate, her eyes meeting his. "You looked so nervous." "I wasn't nervous," he lied with a smile. She laughed softly, a sound that had become music to his ears. "You were, but I wasn't angry. I just didn't know yet." "Know what?" Kael asked, curious. She set her fork down and looked at him. "That you were the person I'd been waiting for, the one who would make all the pain worth it." Kael reached across the table, taking her hand. He squeezed it gently. "And you were the person I never knew I needed until I couldn't live without you." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of their shared history in their eyes. The years of secrecy, the danger, the betrayal, it had all led to this. A new beginning. Together. Elira picked up her wine and took a small sip, eyeing Kael over the rim. "This time, it's not poisoned," she said with a smile. He chuckled softly and took his own drink, his gaze steady on her. "Neither is the future," he replied. And as they sat together in the quiet warmth of their humble dinner, the kingdom around them began its own healing. Not because of the crown, but because of the crown, but because of the love and strength they had built together. A love that no poison could destroy, no title could change, and no court could ever undo. Together they were more than a prince and his wife. They were the architects of a new world. And so ends this chapter of their journey. Kael and Elira have survived treachery, navigated a kingdom on the edge of collapse, and fought for a love that could never be hidden again. Make sure to subscribe. Thank you for reading, and keep an eye out for more twists and turns to come.